So this is a little bit of a children's message, okay, girls? I want to ask you something. Do you know what a nave is? It's a place in the church. Have you heard of a nave? They're saying no. Okay, yeah. So take a look at this. Look above you, and I'm so sorry for everyone at home and listening, but you maybe know Faith Lutheran Church, so just imagine it too, because I don't want to mess with the camera. But girls, look up, and you see the ceiling, how it's like got that point there like a triangle, and it goes all the way down this way, and it has a nice enclosure here. Well, churches have been built, especially churches like this, and usually it's made of wood. They're trying to remind us of being in a boat. And a ceiling like this is kind of like a ceiling that you'd see in a covered boat, maybe like Noah's Ark with all the animals or other boats. And where you sit right now, and where you're sitting in a church where most folks are sitting, is called the nave. And one of the ideas of it is it's supposed to be like you're in the boat. And we are followers of Jesus on a boat. Maybe we're like fishermen, back in the day. And that's where we get our word navy. The Navy are the ones who are all out on the seas. And in some translations, it also means ship. And so you sit in the nave, and you can imagine that you're in a boat. And I've loved that about old churches because it is a lot of wooden beams. These girls know even some other churches in town, the newer versions of them, like places we've been, haven't had a roof like this, have they? Yeah. We've kind of lost some of that boat-like activity, but here we are in the story again today. This miracle reminds us of being on the water with Jesus. Right. Yeah, that's one. Winter is mentioning Sparks United Methodist Church, that's one where her class has done a presentation, and it had a wooden beamed roof like this. So the story today is Peter in the Gospels, and I just am so fascinated by Peter. Don't you think Peter has a story to tell? After all his experiences, he's a fisherman. He's called to be a disciple. Come and follow me. He follows, it seems, with all his heart. He gets the name Rock. I mean, he's got many names. Simon, Peter, you're also called Rock. He will become a major apostle in the early church. And also, he's one who we think the stories tell, he's one that slices off a soldier's ear when they come for Jesus at one point. He's one who denies Jesus 3 times. Peter is one, oh yeah, he gets to walk on water too. Don't you think Peter has a story to tell? Our gospel says that he starts walking on the water, and then sinking, he calls out to Jesus, "Save me." And Jesus does immediately. And then at the end, Peter, with all of the ones in the boat, they all say, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I'm wondering today what we say with our lives, what kind of reflection we echo out into the world with our confession and the confession of our life. And as I was wondering about this, I noticed that a local Lutheran friend, Bill Ledford, he leads the organization called LEAN right now. He's our advocate for that, which is Lutheran Engagement and Advocacy in Nevada. And it's a branch of the ELCA where we live that works for social statements that our denomination puts out. And I noticed that he was inspired by today's Romans reading. And I was thinking about stepping out of the boat. And so he was telling stories, and we talked, and Bill and I both have stories of, we both did not grow up in the Lutheran church, and we're in it now. But part of our wondering, ongoing wondering, is what does it mean that our heart's expression, the Romans reading says, it'll be on your lips, it'll be in your heart. Part of our wondering is, what is our heart's expression inside of this place and inside of this tradition? What does it look like now? And so Peter says, "Save me." And Peter says, "You are truly the Son of God." So Bill and I talked this week of what it looks like to bear the good news and what's in our hearts as it begins to bubble up and be shared. And so I want to share part of my conversation with him with you today. So this is an excerpt of Bill and I talking about the Romans reading.
All right, well, my name's Bill. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Lutheran Engagement and Advocacy in Nevada. I will only say that once because it's a mouthful. But LEAN is just one of the branches of the ELCA at Large's advocacy efforts, and LEAN specifically represents Nevada. And so what we do is that we go to the state legislature specifically and advocate for or against legislation based on the ELCA social statements. And it's a tremendous pleasure to, from a faith perspective, get to engage in government and policy to make justice happen in a real tangible way. And LEAN's been around for a long time. I've been with it for just over 2 years, and it's a fantastic work to do.
So, Bill, you looked at the lectionary this week and you were drawn to the Romans passage. What drew you in? What attracts you to the verses there and what's being said?
What I like about the passage is that it talks about a subject that people have made the mistake of telling me is difficult for Lutherans to talk about. And for those of you that don't know me very well, I can be a little bit of a contrarian personality. And so if you tell me that Lutherans don't like to talk about evangelism, well, that's what I'm going to talk about. And the verses in Romans are it's such a powerful section of verses. I mean, if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, I mean, we quote that all the time. But he goes on to say that basically people can't do that unless they hear about God, and they can't hear about God unless people are sent to talk about him. And as someone who does not identify as an evangelist whatsoever, it's always been important to me that people who also are not evangelists understand that we still have a part of that work to do in our own lives with our own testimony to people around us. And so I wanted to bring people comfort that God accepts our offering to him in that respect, and to not be afraid to do the work of evangelism in proportion to our own lives.
Thank you. I like how I feel like you're dispelling our fears about what evangelism looks like in our day and in our tradition. So would you talk about that word in this passage? And even, I think we're interested too, because we're called the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So what does that word mean in this passage? What does it mean to you?
Well, sure. The word evangelism comes from, in the Greek, the phrase that just means good news. Evangelists are people who bring the good news. And the thing that I think is most important for those of us fellow not evangelists to know and to understand is that we shouldn't be afraid about sharing what God has done in our lives. What is the good news for us? What has God done for you? What has your church family done for you that has changed your life in some way? And to be confident to share that with people around you, not in an overbearing, argumentative, I'm not an apologist, and if you don't know what that means, don't worry, you're probably not one either. But just trusting that what we have been given, our testimony is inherently valid because it's what happened to us. Our experience is important because it's our experience, and hopefully people aren't really in the business of arguing with your experience. So you're not trying to convince people into the kingdom, just share the good news of what's already in your heart. And in the passage, Paul says the word is already close to you, it's in your heart and on your lips. So just letting what's already inside come out and not being caught up in fear and shame about the standards that we've set in the church about evangelism.
So what has been good news in your life? Can you give us a short testimony of, like, for you personally, what is good news?
Yeah, absolutely. My whole life, I look back and there's been this weird reoccurring theme that I don't like things that are temporary. And this was a major cause of stress and anxiety in my life. I looked around and everything in this world was fleeting. I didn't need to be a Christian to see that. And I've been married for 12 years now, and my wife likes to get flowers. I don't like giving somebody flowers because they die. They're already dead. We've cut them off at the root. And so she's nice and she'll dry them out and keep them to make it more permanent. But I was living in a temporary world, hating things that were temporary. And so for me, what really the impact, the good news for me is that there is something that is eternal. There is something that has eternal value. And man, as soon as I caught wind of that message, I said, this is the only thing that matters. And so what's good about that is that's my testimony, and that may not be what's important to everybody else. My wife likes temporary things. So that was not the big impact for her, but that was my good news. And maybe if I share that with the people around me, someone who has that same outlook on things will be blessed, but they will not get to be blessed if I don't share it.
I've always liked this John Caputo quote where he says, religion is for lovers, it's for people with passion and excitement, and that shouldn't be a scary thing. I hear you trying to simplify that for us, like we can follow our hearts in evangelism. Can you say more about that?
I think the biggest pitfall that we as the church at large have done to this evangelistic work is that we've taken what a gifted, called by God, a capital E as I say, evangelist would do, and then try to prescribe that to everybody who may not have that gifting, may not have that passion, and not have that calling. And so it's important to know there's inventories out there. I'm actually a big personality test guy because I was affirmed in my strengths and comforted in my weaknesses through these types of things. And similarly, there's spiritual gift inventories that you can help discern what God has given you, what in your toolbox for the kingdom, what tools do you have? And then use those tools. If you don't have a hammer, then stay away from the nails, and that's okay. But just knowing that God has put inside of you something to give back to him. And so find what that is and know that by giving that to him, and not anything else, this is your offering, God is blessed by that. And it's important, I think, also to say, it's good to spread the message so that other people can be blessed by God the same way that you have. But at the same time, God is worthy of this, whether or not it's beneficial for anybody else. And I think we lose sight of that too, what has God done for you? And not that we are in debt to him in any way. I don't want to get into that aspect of guilt, but man, when someone does something wonderful for me, I want to pay it back and pay it forward. So I think the work of evangelism is both of those things. We're paying it forward to those around us, but we're also paying back to God what he's done for us.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thanks for sharing with us. I hope Faith Lutheran can continue to be involved, and we can chat some more sometime. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to my talk with Bill. So for us today, here and now, those of us in the nave, and for you in the nave of your home, wherever this message finds you today, maybe you're drawn to this message from Romans. Maybe there's a story in your heart or a song in your heart that is finding a new voice, and you're finding a new way to express it. And if that's you, I want to say, awesome. The church and this world needs your expression. We need our own hearts to overflow in their very unique ways. And Scripture says the Spirit is speaking to the churches, and so we trust God's Spirit is speaking to us and overflowing. So be the one, how sweet are the feet of those who bear good news. Bring your good news and tell your story. And if today finds you on the other side of things, there have been times, I know, for all of us in the past 7 months and longer than that, but especially surviving this pandemic, there are times when we all feel worried or scared or small. Our hearts might feel timid and weak, and that is okay. And we are in this together. And so together we cry out to the embodiment of love, Christ, and we say, save us. And together we listen to the embodiment of love, Christ, saying, I am with you. And that one who is with us is not distant. It doesn't just shoot to us across the galaxies. It is one who is so close and has lived this life, truly lived and truly suffered. Like our gospel story today says, even endured storms on the Sea of Galilee. Christ has been through it all and experienced even enduring all weariness, even unto death. All that this world had to give, Christ has experienced. And the world was giving something fierce in the gospel reading. Did you notice it said, they're out on the water, they're being battered by the waves. And the way the story reads is it is like the wind and the waves are against the disciples, pushing all against them. And different translations say they were tossed by the sea, or they were beaten by the sea, they were battered by the waves. And here we are, also battered by waves, battered by this virus, battered by racial injustice, battered by cultural noise and political fighting. And in the midst of all of that, this beautiful news arrives to us. And how beautiful are the feet of this one who comes to us in the midst of our storm and still says, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And truly, he is the Son of God. Amen.